I think it's a scary time for all folks around the world, but Europe has a very particular problem, which is energy. But as far as it, let's start with Italy. We've seen a new government, and it's a far-right movement that is now in power. I personally, from what I know about Italian politics, don't think that this is going to signal some movement for Italy to exit the euro. I think that was a lot of campaign talk. Yeah, the Italian politics are really pro-euro. And you have to keep in mind that Italy has $2.7 trillion in debt, the second largest in Europe. It can't afford to leave.
Right.
It loves the EU perks. It can make all the campaign noises it wants, but at the end of the day, I don't think for the time being that they're going anywhere.
That's going to start dismantling of the euro.
Yeah, I see the euro in reference to the TV series The Squid Game. So in times of crisis, everybody's initial reaction is every man for himself. But then they realize that you need some teamwork to actually survive, while all the time keeping in mind that at the end of the day, you may end up killing each other. We've already seen Brexit, and I think what we have to keep our eye on are the populist movements, like the ones like Hungary with Orban. Those are the really dangerous positions that really endanger the euro system. But I think for the time being, I think the EU is safe for now. I think in the long run, it had structural problems from the beginning. You know, a single currency but individual fiscal policies. It's impossible to manage, and obviously you're going to have resentment between the rich countries and the poorer countries. So I think in the long run, I think the euro system might be in trouble, but not at the moment. I think it's the beginnings of a currency war, and that is I'm absolutely certain that we're heading into a global monetary system reset. And there's so much evidence. If you look at it in terms of chess, there are chess pieces moving all over the place. And although we can't see the end game, you know that the monetary system is in play. And I can give you numerous examples of the indications of where that is taking place, with the expansion of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, including other countries like Pakistan and India and Saudi Arabia, enlarging that trade bloc per se. You've got the BRICS coming together, talking about creating their own reserve currency as a basket of currencies, much like the SDRs at the IMF issues. You've got China obviously testing its digital currency in cross-border transactions. You got Russia talking about a golden ruble, which is a token backed by gold. You've got the Moscow gold standard, which has been talked about, to counteract what they see, what the Russians see as Western manipulation of the gold price, so that it's not priced fairly. They want to create their own exchange in Moscow, and they're trying to attract members from around the world so that they can create their own gold standard outside of a system they see as manipulated. So, and there are many, many more. So I'm watching all these pieces, and I'm going, okay, it's in play. It's in play. I can't tell you what the end result is, but Putin and Xi have made it very clear they want an alternative to the US dollar. And although their reasons are more about, the fear of sanctions or the fear of sanctions, the rest of the world is going, hey, this is pretty cool, because they've been held hostage for so long by the US dollar supremacy. What's it done? It has gone from beggar thy neighbor policies to almost bankrupt thy neighbor. Right? You got the US dollar right now that's going through the roof. It's up 20%. So what's that doing to the rest of the world? A lot of emerging market sovereign debt is priced in US dollars. How are they going to service that debt? IMF bailouts are at a record high right now. Everybody's going, yeah, we wouldn't mind an alternative currency to the US dollar. And for the global south, those that are not in conflict with each other, like the West, Russia-China Act, for the global south, the Indias, the Brazils, the rest, they would love to have a separate alternative trading currency where they can choose to trade with both. They can trade with the US dollar or trade with that, whatever that thing ends up looking like. And that, when it happens, and it will happen in some way, and it's going to I doubt it's going to be by consensus. It's going to happen. It's going to be forced upon the U.S. dollar, and then things will change, and the U.S. dollar will lose its status as the supreme dominant currency. How are they going to stop it when 80% of the world's population wants a change? You know, it's basically the U.S. and the West, so it's Europe and Japan in one camp that would like, well, I can only speak for the U.S. The U.S. would like the status quo to remain. That's absolutely certain. And they will fight it. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that this is going to be a nasty fight when it comes down to it. But how are they going to stop it when the rest of the world is stacking up in gold reserves? And they've been doing it for the last 12 years. Every central bank in the world outside of the West is piling on their gold reserves. What do you think they're doing that for? Well, it concerns me only from the point of view that I think it may usher in very dangerous times.
Right.
Because it's seldom that global power shifts without conflict. You know, if you look back through history, it's very seldom that there's a power shift from a global leader in finance, commerce, military to another without some form of deadly conflict. And that's the part that worries me.
Would you say it was the sanctions imposed on Russia that fast-tracked this path to the bifurcation of the currency system? Or was it already in play? Was it already happening years ago?
It was already in play because of the China-U.S. relations. That was already in play. China was looking and starting to test ideas as to how to shift out of the U.S. dollar system to de-dollarize. And obviously, they're doing their own thing with gold, which we can talk about. But definitely the Russian sanctions on their foreign exchange reserves and exclusion from the SWIFT system changed, just put it all into...
But this is where I say the U.S., right? The U.S. dollar, looking for alternatives. Were they not thinking?
I don't think they were looking that far ahead. I think they were looking at it just through tunnel vision as to the Russia-West conflict over the Ukraine. I don't think they thought it through properly, and I think they maybe miscalculated how much the rest of the world is really ready for a change. Because so not only is the U.S. impoverishing the developing world that have to pay their debts and service their debts in very overpriced U.S. dollars, but the U.S. is also exporting its inflation. By having a much stronger currencies, it makes the imports of all these countries much more expensive. And to the point where the UN the other day begged the Fed to stop raising rates. And, you know, obviously the Fed is focused on salvaging their very poor reputation of managing monetary systems this far. So I think that the world in general is very ready for this. And I think it's going to be hard for the U.S. to stop 80% of the world's population from doing what they need to do. Russia, it's obvious what they've done. They, pre the invasion of Ukraine, they de-dollarized, they sold most of their dollars, and now are the world's fifth largest gold holder, okay? So they were prepared for this. They thought ahead. China, they were very transparent about it, so you could see what Russia was doing. China's a whole, and I think China's the key, not Russia. China's a whole different ball of wax. You know, if you know about the Chinese gold reporting system over the last 20 years, it's not transparent by any means. They, several times in the last 20 years, they've stopped reporting, and then they come out, and when they report, gold reserves go much higher. The last time they did that was 2019.
That's right.
And they published that they had 1,950 tons of gold. There's no way on earth that is possible.
You don't believe the numbers?
Not even close. Think about it this way. China is the world's largest gold producer, 15% of world gold production, and they don't allow the export of mined gold. They're the world's largest importer of gold. They've mined 7,000 tons in the last 15 years. We know what they've mined. We don't know, because it's very difficult to gauge how much they've imported. I am absolutely certain the reason they stopped reporting is because, I know as a former trader, if you're trying to accumulate something, the last thing you want to do is show your hand, because you're going to drive the price up. So they're doing it quietly, and I think that now that the cat's out of the bag, that everybody's talking about a monetary reset, I think that the next time they declare, whenever that may be, could be a few years from now, it'll be as part of a new monetary strategy by China. I wouldn't be surprised, and again, I'm just speculating, but I'm just looking at the numbers of how much gold China is accumulating over the years. It's massive. Since 1995, 46,000 tons have moved from the west to the east, and I think most of that is China. And I think that, again, they, in their minds, need to have a certain amount of gold. Keep in mind the U.S. has 8,100 tons.
Right.
And if gold is going to be part of the new monetary system, it's got to be something that is that they can prove that they can back the currency, whether it's to the tune of 20% or 40% gold backing with the gold that they own. Well, it was working better than what happened after 1971. I mean, look what's happened. The dollar since 1971 has lost 95% of its purchasing value. Okay, basically, when they went off the gold standard in 71, they let the dollar float freely. First of all, you had 10 years of inflation. And that if you held only dollars in your checking account from 1971, it'd be worthless. The purchasing power, it just isn't there. There's been so much faith lost in fiat currencies that if someone were to launch something new, to get the initial credibility, you need to have hard asset backing. I don't know if you saw that Credit Suisse report talking about Bretton Woods 3. Very good report. I don't agree with all of it because what Credit Suisse was saying is that the world is heading towards a currency system backed by commodities in general, right, which I think is going to be too hard to manage or too volatile. The shipping and storage is going to be very difficult to calculate, whatever. Gold, on the other hand, is owned almost universally by all the central banks already. It is viewed as money. It is money. It's not being spelled out in what actually is happening. People, I've talked about gold being managed in the past, or someone is directing traffic. But I think if you look at the situation closely, it's really a system of players that, for a combined mutual and individual interest, like the fact that gold stays suppressed, and that is policymakers, the Western banks. And why do they do this? The IMF, why do they do this? Because everybody is profiting greatly by the status quo, where the dollar is the supreme currency and where the West controls the international credit markets. And I think if you look at it, it's not a conspiracy, so you'll never find a smoking gun, because it's not a conspiracy. It's just loosely aligned players with mutual interest. And so I kind of refer it as the Al-Qaeda of the financial world. Not that I want to compare the financial world to a terrorist group, but it's not a top-down command structure. It's a number of people that have a belief system that is keeping them at the top of the game. And I think U.S. dollar supremacy and control of the international credit markets allows a whole group of players that would love to see gold stay where it is. Because if it starts to move up sharply, it throws a question into the whole system.